Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Samantha Politics. I'm your host, Samantha Carlin, and this is your source for global politics to learn about all the things happening in the countries around the world. We also elevate the voices of women in national security and foreign policy. Obviously, tonight's episode is going to be focusing in again on Ukraine as the largest invasion in Europe happens since World War II and continues to press on. Waiting in the wings, we have an amazingly brilliant international lawyer who's also at the Fletcher School right now getting her LLM, my alma mater. So I'm very proud to have her here, and she is from Ukraine. Now, this is pretty much a show where we rely on contributors like you. So if you're interested in supporting the show, just go to patreon.com/SamanthaPolitics1 to support the show. The show is also supported by Manhattan Wealth Management, a financial advisory firm, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about them and why they are the financial advisors that you should choose towards the middle of the show. But for now, let's get down to what the latest is going on in Ukraine. So 2 weeks ago, it was looking really bad. And you know what? It's only gotten worse. And something that was happening at the beginning of this, the invasion was there was, are they attacking military targets, but they're hitting civilians by accident? It is so unbelievably clear now that this is just total chaos and that the Russians are not only hitting civilian targets, but they are deliberately killing civilians. Today, the U.S. Embassy reported that 10 people standing in line just to buy bread, they just wanted to eat something, were murdered by Russian troops. Another thing that happened, Zach, if you could throw up that image of that theater in Mariupol. So this was the drama theater in Mariupol where hundreds of residents were sheltering inside, hoping for safety because Mariupol has been one of the most besieged cities in Ukraine. Well, let's look at it now. Zach, if you could show that second image of the theater. The Russians deliberately bombed the theater where all of these poor people were hiding, and it's apparently even hard to get to them to see how many people were there and how many people died because there's so much rubble blocking the entrance to the theater. What I don't understand about, this, similarly in Syria, what I don't understand is what's the point of taking over a country if by the time you've taken it over, you've destroyed the entire country? it's essentially a wasteland. That's something that I didn't understand with Assad, and I don't get it with Putin either. Destroying not just the people, but all of these beautiful historic buildings. What exactly do you want to take over? It doesn't make much sense. But then again, here we are with a Putin who is obsessed with Ukraine, as one of our last guests said. So it's important to know now they also bombed a maternity hospital in Mariupol, and there's an image that is just unbelievably striking, and it is of a pregnant woman who is dying, or I think she ends up dying, and so does the child inside her. Again, what are pregnant women doing exactly to you? They're not exactly fighting on the front lines. In Mariupol alone, thousands are feared dead. Now, when we went back again 2 weeks, the whole death count was estimated to be about 2,000. Now in Mariupol, we're looking at a death count of approximately 2,500 just in that city alone. So we can see how much the shelling has continued. People are also starving to death without access to food and water. So we're now not only having a war, but we have a full-fledged humanitarian crisis. Zach, if you could show that first video with the captions below.
How we live now. This is where we need to stay. This is where we give birth to our children. This is how our day starts, with messages to loved ones. How are you? Is it quiet? With fresh news about the war. With tears. With hope. This is how we go out for groceries. This is how we get married right now because we need to hurry up. This is how we travel now. This is what we hear. This is what we see. This is what we remember.
So that video is from Ukraine, obviously, and is showing exactly what are Ukrainian people experiencing right now. A similar video, I didn't show it because it was much longer, was shown today by President Zelensky to the United States Congress. Also similarly devastating, with pictures of little children's feet sticking out that are dead, of dead babies. I mean, this was it's rough. It's important to see, but it is so hard to watch, which is exactly why he showed it. The term "close the sky" refers to Ukraine's begging the U.S. to enforce a no-fly zone within Ukraine. NATO has already said it is not going to do a no-fly zone, but this was a last plea from Zelensky. He also asked for more weapons, specifically aircraft, in order to fight the Russians if we don't do a no-fly zone, us referring to the U.S. U.S. Congress U.S. Congress stood up and applauded. He had a standing ovation, but you could tell he didn't really care about a standing ovation from a bunch of congresspersons that like to look good because they all have to stand up and show they care. He wants help. So what happened? Some of the things that he said to try to appeal to the U.S. Congress, he said, "Remember Pearl Harbor, the terrible morning of December 7th, 1941, when your sky was black from the planes attacking you. And then remember September 11th, a day in 2001 when evil tried to turn your cities into battlefields. Our country's experiencing those every day." So obviously trying to relate to the American people there and saying, we are just, I mean, they're under constant bombardment. This is not a one and done. This is every single day that people are now living in this and wondering if their loved ones are going to be alive tomorrow, if they are going to be alive tomorrow. This is something that just cannot be ignored. The other thing he said that I thought was pretty moving, he said, "Right now, the destiny of our country is being decided." And then he said, "Today I turned 45 years old, but my heart stopped today when the hearts of 100 children stopped beating," referring to all of the kids who have been killed in the war. So what happened? What was our response from the US? President Biden said that we would send $800 million in additional military assistance to Ukraine. Something else that was important that Biden did say today, and our guest and I are going to talk about this, is that Putin is a war criminal. Now, he hadn't used that language before, and this is the first time he has said that. And I think it's just so obvious that a war criminal is someone who is deliberately murdering civilians and could care less, literally could care less, and that they're part of the strategy. And with obviously no caring about international law at all, which says that you're supposed to avoid civilians, you're supposed to avoid humanitarian aid, and you're supposed to avoid journalists. So clearly doesn't care, and he's deliberately targeting them, flouting any rules of international law whatsoever when it comes to war. U.S. journalists are now being killed, which is hitting close to home, pun intended. What's happening in Russia? Russians are now not able to access Facebook or Instagram. This must be devastating, especially for like 15-year-old boys and girls who I know live on Instagram. And Twitter is now limited. The Russian government is also saying that it's not allowed to be called a war. And anybody who calls it a war is taken into custody and put in jail. Reportedly, 15,000 people in Russia have been arrested for protesting the war. What else? We also have, as we mentioned, a humanitarian crisis. So in our last report 2 weeks ago, 1 million people had fled Ukraine. 2 weeks later, it's now tripled. It's now 3 million people have left Ukraine. It's tripled in 2 weeks. I mean, that is a stunning number, 3 million people. So before I bring in our guest, I just want to say it's easy to stay in our bubbles in the United States and enjoy the sunny weather and pretend that this is not happening because it's not in our country. But we have so many ties to Europe that it's unbelievable. There was a study today that was released that looked at business leaders in America, and it showed that 6% have people or operations in Ukraine, 15% have employees or operations in Russia, and 34% have employees or operations in both countries. So, even in terms of our employees and how much we utilize talent in Russia and warehouses and contractors in Russia and Ukraine, like this is our staff. This is many of our relatives. I've mentioned that my family comes from Tarnopol. They might still live there if they hadn't all been murdered in the Holocaust. Tarnopol is, guess what, within Ukraine. So I just want you to know that this could easily be you. It could easily be you that is hiding in a bomb shelter. It could easily be you that is worrying if your child is going to die tomorrow. It could easily be you whose husband or brother is fighting on the front lines of this war without, our countries are trying to help with military equipment, but it's just not enough. The other thing that's important to know is if you think that Putin is going to stop at Poland, think again. Or excuse me, if you think that Putin is going to stop with Ukraine, think again. Former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, who became famous in the Trump impeachment trial, says, if Putin is successful in Ukraine, I think he will continue to move forward, maybe not immediately because he's bitten off an awful lot with Ukraine. That's what history shows us, where he invaded Georgia in 2008 and got away with it. He invaded Ukraine in 2014 and got away with it. And now in 2022, he's invading Ukraine again. And then she says, if we need to make sure he doesn't get away with it, if he does, there is a likelihood that at some point he will continue moving west, which is Poland. So this is a really dangerous scenario. He is shown in terms of the fact that he attacked the whole country of Ukraine when most military experts thought that it would be at the most a limited incursion into the Donbass and the Luhansk regions by attacking all of Ukraine and throwing in all these, Russian conscripts, these kids that have no idea what they're doing and are just given some guns and bombs and doing whatever the heck they want. Clearly he's showing that he's thrown all caution to the wind and really will do anything to take more land and more power. So with that, I want to just say a quick word to our sponsor before we bring in our guest. So Manhattan Wealth Management Group is an independent financial services firm based in New York, New York. They understand all of the challenges that people face planning for retirement. I frankly didn't even realize that I was supposed to be planning for retirement because I feel pretty young. Apparently, I'm supposed to be planning for retirement now. So it is never too early to start planning for retirement. So if your goals are preparing for retirement, college savings, or estate strategy, their service is highly personalized and it focuses on your needs, wants, and goals and objectives. Something else I really like is that they have a dedicated ESG portfolio, which is looking at and investing in only funds that meet environmental, social, and governance criteria. So they have a very good ESG portfolio, and I recommend them just for that. So you don't have to work harder and longer if you put your money to work for you. That's what rich people do. That's what you should do. So you can visit their website at www.manhattanwealth.com. And if you're watching this, we'll also throw it in the chat. So I want to move on to our guest who's waiting in the wings. Oleksandra received her master's degree in international law from the Institute of International Relations at the National University of Kiev in 2018. She's worked as the senior legal counsel with the legal department of the biggest Ukrainian energy company, where her focus was harmonization of Ukrainian energy legislation with EU regulations and reform of the unified gas transport system of Ukraine. She also worked as a research assistant at the Center of International Environment and Resource Policy at Fletcher, exploring the policy implications of climate security and climate change, including nuclear energy. At the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, my alma mater, so I'm very happy she's at Fletcher, Oleksandra focuses on public international law, World Trade Organization law, in particular looking at the links of the energy sector and renewables and climate. So welcome to the show, Oleksandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation. Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much. So, Oleksandra, first of all, as I've said to you, I'm deeply saddened by what's happening, and I know many people share that. And hopefully we can shed some light on this here today. But I'm so sorry for what your family and your friends are going through.
Thank you for your sympathy and solidarity and standing with all Ukrainians. Thank you.
So, can you tell us, where exactly are you from in Ukraine?
I am from central Ukraine. It's a very small but beautiful town, Bar, and it's a very old town. It's more than 600 years old, with a beautiful history behind it, and hopefully nice future. And all my family is located in central Ukraine, including my parents, my sister, my grandmother. And I moved to Kiev for my university, and I've been living there for more than 8 years, and worked also in the capital of Ukraine.
Can you tell us what's going on in your hometown? What are you hearing from on the ground? First, let's talk about where your family is in Bar.
Central Ukraine currently is more or less safe, but the terminology is very hard these days because people are hearing air raid sirens up to 5 times per day, even in the relatively safe regions in Ukraine, all over the country, as my family is. And when the war started, it was really hard to get adjusted to go into your basement. And my grandmother is 87 years old, and it's not easy for all the elderly to live in the war situation. And obviously the situation is quite okay, if I can say that. People are working, volunteering, extra time volunteering, helping each other, accepting in their houses and hosting forcefully internally displaced people from various regions where currently fierce attacks are being happening. And it's a truly spirit of community when everyone is ready to help, supporting each other. And I have a lot of stories to share with you.
So can you tell us a little bit about, I know you have friends that are in Kiev. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from your friends in Kiev?
My friends and colleagues from Kiev who are still there and don't want to leave because it's their house and they want to be there to protect their house, and it's important for them to remain connected with their parents and close ones. So one of my friends is pregnant right now, and she's about to give birth to a new kid in Ukraine, in the capital. And I can just translate you the texts I'm
Sure.
receiving from her. In it's 4 a.m. in the morning, and she writes me, I cannot sleep. It's very loud. We are spending all the night in our basement. It's very scary, and I'm trying to read through the news just to relax a bit, but I don't know what is going to happen next day. And we studied together at the university, and we all had a very nice plans for spring and summer of 2022. And she's starting a family, and they're having a kid. And right now, she is not even sure whether she will be able to give birth in a hospital, which would not be attacked. And these stories happen all over the Kiev. I can see buildings in various districts in Kiev where I used to live that are under attack. The subway station I used to take every day that is currently not destroyed by damaged. It's heartbreaking to know that my friends live in the house nearby, like within few blocks, and it's a constant stress to check whether it's not the house they are staying right now. I know they're taking all the precautionary measures and following the official instructions, but regardless of that, it's not helpful to stay calm.
Right. So from what I understand that, when people say that they're hiding in bomb shelters, it's not necessarily protected from bombs. It's just in the basement.
It depends. It depends on the shelters, and obviously not everyone has a cool bomb shelter, so to say. And it depends on the time of the air raid siren, and some in the 99% of cases the sirens help and people get warned and can leave their houses. But regardless of that, there are a lot of casualties among the civilians because the shelling is happening constantly, and you cannot every time be prepared for that. And this is a very horrible situation because people get morally stressed to the level that they cannot even stand going to the bomb shelter anymore. And
Mm,
it's very hard to encourage them to do that when I'm living currently here in the US, where I can see the safe blue sky and peaceful streets, and I'm telling them, please go to the bomb shelter. I know you are tired, I know it's cold, I know it's very hard, and it's not simple to do that, to
right.
just pack your bag, take your documents and passport and leave, and not even be sure whether you will have a house to go back in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be unbelievably devastating. And so, you're hearing that a lot of residential buildings are being bombed in Kiev where you used to hang out and your friends used to live.
Yes, that's true. All majority of districts in Kiev are damaged. It's obviously the situation is controlled, and people in the capital are very thankful for all the protection and what our government is doing to keep the capital strong. But still, it is happening. Just yesterday, I saw the district, which is really close to my university. I lived there for 6 years, and um, it's really hard to look at those footages, and even the buildings. I don't know any people from that district. It doesn't matter. My whole family is Ukraine. All my friends is Ukraine, and it's the entire territory is important for me, and I'm learning the geography of every small town and the streets that are there, because I know that these are my people. And it doesn't matter whether I know now nobody from a particular village.
Right.
It Everything matters to Ukrainians.
Right. Well, do you know with Mariupol, it seems like Mariupol has gotten such a heavy dose of shelling. Do you have any feedback on what's going on in that city, or why Mariupol is being so heavily targeted?
Yes, it's the city of heroes, and to be honest, I haven't visited that city, but I visited Berdyansk, which is really close, and people are protesting there, and I admire those people so much. Yes, Mariupol is a very hard situation right now. It's a truly a devastating humanitarian catastrophe that is happening, and Russians are not allowing any green corridors, that are not following the rules prescribed by international humanitarian law to help people get evacuated. And
Can you explain just
basically,
quickly, Alexandra, what a green corridor is?
it's the established negotiated routes under which, in a particular time, civilians can get evacuated under protection without any harm to be shot or killed. But it is happening everywhere. So for a long time, people in Mariupol could not even leave the city. They have no food, they have no water. The first time I heard that the small child died because of dehydration, it was the first time I could literally cry, because this cannot happen in 2022. It just cannot happen. And civilians are trying to get together to stay strong, but how can they stay strong if the maternity hospitals are being bombed, if the shelters are being bombed, if they have no access to electricity, to just normal life conditions, and they don't know what is going to happen because they are being promised that they can leave, and Ukrainian diplomacy and government is doing extreme hard work to make sure it is happening. But every morning I can read the news from the representative of the government who is working on humanitarian issues, and she's telling that Russian side cannot secure those corridors and people cannot leave. And yes, there are more than 300 of cars that managed to leave the city and being transported to the Zaporizhia, which is also in the eastern Ukraine. But what day of the war it is right now?
Right, right. It's just unbelievable. So something that I didn't mention that was interesting today was that another former ambassador to Ukraine was advocating for a limited no-fly zone, which he said basically means a no-fly zone that's specifically for humanitarian purposes. So to ensure the safe delivery of humanitarian aid and to ensure green corridors or safe corridors. What's your opinion on that?
Our president and government are trying to persuade Western leaders to make all efforts they can, including providing equipment, arms, and everything that can help to protect Ukraine from the sky. Because unfortunately, and it's very true, that severe attacks are happening because of the attacks from the sky. And I get very upset when I can read from the news and from the media in US that it's no, most of the fights are happening on the ground. It's not on the ground. It's not only on the ground. And how can you hide from the bombs that are and the rockets they are hitting and shelling the apartment buildings, the schools, the kindergartens, the hospitals? How can you get protected from that? And the influence that can be given by the support with the sky, with the everything that Western democracy can provide is super important. Even if it would be partial support, even it would be support with the humanitarian assistance, but still with military component, it's so important because every day what I can hear from my friends in different cities is that please close the sky. We cannot stand it anymore. We cannot live in bomb shelters, in subways. We cannot give birth to our children in the subways. Yes, we will. We will do everything to stay strong. We will never bow down or like stop fighting or give up. Any Ukrainians, we will always continue to stand for Ukraine. But please help us because it's impossible that we cannot leave our houses because the rockets are hitting random apartment buildings in various cities. And these are not military bases, these are not military airports, these are not military camps or something. These are just houses when ordinary people, civilian people are living, having their families, parents, kids, pets, and everything.
Do you know anybody who's fighting in the armed forces of Ukraine?
Yes, of course. And my family is also there. For security reasons, I would not disclose all the details, but I can assure you that people are joining the army with the entire families. It's not
Wow.
the one person from a family, it's the whole family basically.
Wow.
And I'm very proud for my family, and I hope they will be safe and strong and healthy, and I'm praying for them every day. And I know also people who are not my relatives obviously, who are in the army, who are professional military experts, etc. And they are amazing people. They are so courageous and heroic, and they don't even think twice whether they should protect their country. I know colleagues who are lawyers who are joining the army and
Wow.
joining defense forces because they want to protect their parents, their wives, and their kids. And lots of people obviously get trained and are getting trained, but they will never give up. It's not even about your personal safety. Artists are going to the defense forces, musicians, actors, I
Wow.
mean, comedians and stand-up people. Everyone is really helpful, and everyone is picking their front line and doing a very hard work.
It's unbelievable just hearing these people who would be more comfortable in a library or playing the trumpet picking up guns. I mean, it really just shows, I think, that Ukrainians see that, like, I mean, this is David versus Goliath, right? You're facing this gargantuan country that also doesn't care about human life and will happily keep sending soldiers in to die and doesn't care. When you look back, it's, kind of interesting. When you look back at World War II, a lot of people basically say that the only reason that the Allies won is because Hitler went back against the Hitler-Stalin pact. And so then what happened is that Stalin kept sending in Russian troops, and Russian troops were dying and dying and dying. And then the Germans started to go north into Leningrad, and it was too cold for them. But essentially, it was the numbers of the Russian army. Ironically, that, but we saw in World War II how much the Russian army will just keep throwing people at the front. They'll just keep throwing people in that have no idea what they're doing. And yeah, it's just unreal.
Yeah, like the World War II is the different case, obviously, and I would tell was the Soviet army, and every fourth Belarus and Ukrainian soldier died in that war, and Soviet army was compiled a lot by Ukrainians, and all the battlefield was on mostly on the territory of my country that was occupied, and my grandparents had to leave the country. And I remember stories from my grandmother who had to leave the country when she was 6 years old because of the war, and right now she's 87 years old. And I know stories of my late grandparents who one my grandmother had to she was a very small girl in the western Ukraine, and my grandfather had also to leave the occupied Ukraine. And I know people who were fighting on for their land, and it's just the idea that freedom and your country means so much for Ukrainians. It's not the empty words; it's what we really value.
The other thing that I find interesting talking to you is like how drastically, and this is what, people are saying, like how drastically Putin underestimated the Ukrainians. It's not like Russia's invading Australia or some country that like it doesn't know at all. Like Russians and Ukrainians are related. They are married. They like it's so clear and so obvious to me how badass the Ukrainians are. I don't understand like Putin, you guys are unbelievable in terms of the resistance, in terms of the fighting back, and just, I mean, it is just so unbelievably inspiring. Like, I guess Putin didn't get the memo that you guys are unbelievable badasses.
That's true. Ordinary people are volunteering every day. I know teachers from my school that are cooking, preparing food and meals to the cities in eastern Ukraine, who are donating clothes, helping with coordination, hosting people in their houses, donating their cars for the defense forces, for the army. The elderly people will buy some new clothes for incoming Ukrainians who have to leave their houses because they know they can't take much with them, and they want to make sure they have warm clothes and everything. These are elderly people who have a very modest savings, and they barely can support themselves, but they are ready to give up for the young generation and for their peers, for their community. And these stories are just amazing, how people are united, coordinated, and they are multitasking. They are doing a lot of project management. They are working under very stressful conditions, learning new skills, because you have one profession, but these days you will do everything to help your community and to help your country. So it's really true that the heroism of Ukrainians is just unbelievable. But unfortunately, the one thing why Putin underestimated Ukraine is the role of propaganda, and
Mm.
what the government and everyone in Russia was telling him and was spreading about Ukraine, the horrible lies that have been all over the country
Right.
for not only the past 8 years, unfortunately.
So
So
let's
there are a lot of logical
yeah.
reasons why they thought that Ukraine would be weak, but it's not true, and Ukraine will never, never surrender.
So I want to look at so there was a Twitter chain. I want to thank Olha Krushelnitska, my dear friend and Women's Leadership Challenge participant. She sent me this thread that I translated from Ukrainian, and it's talking about a town that was evacuated, Gostomel, and a guy who's talking about it, and he says that the paratroopers, together with the elite Moscow unit, said they were planning to study and happened to be here by accident. And then they said directly that they were going to liberate Kiev from the Nazis and the West, as well as remove the top of our government. So this liberating the Ukrainians from the Nazis, like there seems to be that these, some of these people who went in really believe that they're denazifying the country, and that this word Nazi, because Nazis were the enemy of the past, has really been utilized to galvanize these people into, like, some person said to me, I heard Russia's doing good things there. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like they're getting rid of the Nazis. I'm like, the president's Jewish. Like, what are we even talking about? where are the Nazis? Like, if anyone's the Nazis, it's you.
That is true, and unfortunately, it's not the something as a fairy tale. People have been very critical of Ukrainians because they thought that if we love our land, our motherland, and appreciate our history and culture, then we are nationalists or something. But we are just loving our land and keeping respect to our roots and families and where we belong, and care a lot about our identity as Ukrainians. And this ridiculous but true situation, which is widespread in Russia, that Ukrainians are just too severe with their nationalism, and which is a horrible statement. And we just love our land as other people and citizens of our countries do. And what else is important then, when the revolution of dignity was happening in Kiev, and I was a part of that, as it started from the student protests that that were run to support the European direction of Ukraine and the EU Ukraine Association Agreement, which we wanted for our former corrupt president to sign. And it started as a peaceful student protest, and all my friends were there and I was there. And what Russians told us, that we were getting paid for those protests, and it was sponsored by the US. And
Oh
my
my God.
friends in
Are you
Russia
serious?
believed that.
Oh my God.
I'm more than serious, with a hand on
How
my
much
heart.
did you get paid? I'm just kidding.
I would like to have a house somewhere, on the
It is
sea
so
side,
ridiculous. The only
for
person who
those. But
pays for stuff is Donald Trump to pay people to attend his rallies to make it look like more people like him than actually do.
and the fact that students, unarmed and unarmed civilians, would go to the streets of Kiev and would fight for democracy and wouldn't be afraid of the government and would work really hard for their human rights, was just too much for Russians to grasp. And they couldn't believe that people can get united and can work hard to make change in their country. It was a truly moment of dignity for all the Ukrainians to understand what it really values to live in the democracy. And if you are not happy with your government, you should do something. And you cannot just sit and simply tweet or post any any footage of horrible events happening. And when people got started to get killed in Kiev, it was in February. It was winter, and I was a student there, and we lived not far from the city center, and I could see that. I know that my friends would go there, volunteer to help, and we stayed there because it is our capital, and we are fighting for the democracy and for fundamental freedoms of people. And if the corrupt government is not doing okay, then we, the citizens who are also responsible for those who we are electing, or if elections are not going okay, we are responsible for that, and we have to show our position. It's never impossible to be apolitical. What it means, you are paying taxes, you are getting education from your government.
I wanted to
You're
stop you. So do you think that it's so unbelievable for Russians because they don't do it?
I guess so, because they were trying to protest even before with a lot of human rights violations happening in Russia. But it's the history of feeling oppressed and allowing that to happen to you. Because when the human rights organizations are being cancelled and closed in Russia, there were no protests and people were silent.
Mm,
And silence is acquiescence. It's the conscious
mm.
choice of adult people, of smart people, or people who don't let themselves to get educated, to open their mind, and to stop their brainwashing system of propaganda that is happening in Russia. And the democracy is not cannot be built within a few weeks or days. Is a constant and very hard work, and it demands the attention, a very close attention of all society. And no one can feel that I'm not important and my profession or my role does not pertain to politics. It's not true. Lawyers can do their work, human rights activists must do their work, and society must support them. When you know that the people cannot perform, that they are getting deported from the country, that they are getting arrested for some tweeters or posts on the social media, people must protest and raise their voice, because there are still in the constitution of Russian Federation some guarantees of the respect to human rights and freedoms, but apparently they don't care about neither their constitution nor international law obligations they are having.
What do you think about the Russians that are rising up finally now and protesting?
First of all, it's a very tiny amount.
Mm.
Russia is 140 millions of people, and in your very brilliant opening remarks, you mentioned that up to 15,000 of
Yeah.
people were protesting.
Were arrested.
I'm very
I'm not sure
sorry,
how
but
many
yeah,
were protesting, but
yeah,
15,000
it
have been
is not
arrested.
enough. It is not enough. And signing petition is not enough. Our children are being killed. And it's signing a petition is the least you can do. Oh my God, is what you must do every day. But of course, people must get support for protests. And current regime of repressions is already happening in Russia. Lots of artists are leaving country, and smart people are leaving country because they don't want to be connected to the country. And the fact that people are protesting can be encouraging, but I, as a Ukrainian citizen, as a woman who grew up there, who got my education there, I know very well the history of Russia and culture of Russia and the politics of Russia and the media. And I believe that they are not ready to raise their voice and to get matured in
Mm.
terms of activism and rule of law that must rule, and not the rule of force and repressions and lies and propaganda.
What do you think about Putin being called a war criminal by Biden? And also, if I think he is a war criminal as well. You're a specialist in international law. What exactly would that look like? If he is, would he be tried by the ICC, the European Court of Human Rights? Like, how would that happen, and how soon would that happen? Would that actually have any impact on the war itself, or would it just be a way to bring justice, to, make him even more of a pariah than he already is and hold him accountable?
It's a very complex matter, and let me start first that lots of Ukrainian lawyers, prominent professors, with the help of international law community from United Kingdom and other countries, are now working very hard on the declaration and raising awareness and support from the wider international community for the establishment of special tribunal that would deal with the international criminal law cases and with the crimes that Russians are committing in Ukraine.
So essentially, it's a special tribunal, just like the ICTY was for Yugoslavia, the International
Yes.
Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia. So a special tribunal for Ukraine. Got it.
Professors from my home university in Ukraine, International Institute for International Relations, are working really hard from that, and it's all over the media, of course. And the fact that President of US is calling Putin a war criminal is obviously a very influential statement, and it has its impact on all the alliances and democracies. But I, as a lawyer, as a trained lawyer, and as a person who have worked with law, would like to state that lawyers tend to be very careful with the definitions and terms they are using. It's very important to be precise and stick to the rule of law and to what international agreements are telling us. The International Court of Human Rights you mentioned. Today, basically, Russia was expelled from the Council of Europe. They themselves submitted a, so to say, petition to they don't want to be a part of European human rights legal order. But today, the Council of Europe decided that they cannot have Russia anymore as its member. It means that Russia would not be a part to the European Convention of Human Rights. And last week we thought that it means that the convention will stop its force for Russians till the 2023. But since it was the decision of the council, the court would not be able to accept any cases that arise after March 15th. And basically, the situation with the human rights protection in Russia would get really, really horrible. And the side that Russia itself is willing to get its citizens to take these mechanisms from its own citizens is a very impressive one, in a bad way, of course. And the fact that some cases could still be heard before the International Court of Human Rights is a promising fact, but I believe that international community and international lawyers in Ukraine and those who support Ukraine will build their coalitions and work really hard on the cases before the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court. And today we already received a order on the preliminary measures from the International Court of Justice, where a court voted in favor of condemning Russian invasions, and it's a whole big story to discuss.
I mean, it sounds like the international law community is really ramped up and is trying to do as much as it can within the international law statutes to hold Putin and his cronies accountable, which is great. I want to go back to the Russian propaganda because I want to show some of the examples of Russian propaganda and how exactly they're twisting this for their people. So they're obviously in Russian. So we're going to show these one at a time. So Zach, if you could put up that first one, and we're going to ask you to dissect what they're talking about. So the first one is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So can you tell us a little bit about what they're talking about, what they're spreading exactly?
This is a ridiculous comment by the foreign ministry spokeswoman on alleged military biological activity in Ukrainian biological laboratories, where they found the traces of military biological program that is being implemented together with the United States Department of Defense. First of all, in itself, it's a horrible statement to make on the official website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of such a country. And it's an official note. It's not just some sort of media or news report or other source. It's the official website which represents the country on the international arena. And we all know that recently the emergency meeting of the Security Council was convened because Russia was claiming that Ukraine is developing a biological weapon, and UN told that we have no proofs, no traces of that. And Russia says, oh, if you don't have any proofs, it doesn't mean it's not happening. You should look more clearly. And it's also condemning US that is helping with that to
They'll
develop
find
kind
any
of
way to
weapon.
bring us in as the villains, like whatever. I mean, they might say that I'm there flying a flag. I don't know. While I'm sitting here in Washington D.C., like, and Hunter Biden is, also involved in, and he's a Nazi. I don't know. It's like they'll just make stuff up. It's like unbelievable. So let's go to the next one, Zach. So this one's about the maternity hospital. Can you explain what exactly are they?
Yeah.
What's their line when it comes to the maternity hospital?
We're already discussed that in the beginning of the show. So Russia claimed that the pictures of that hospital in Mariupol, it's not a maternity hospital or children's hospital. They have proof that it's a military base used by Ukrainians to have a shield by civilians, but basically it was used for military purposes, and that's why they were not targeted civilians and such a places as a children's hospital. Obviously, they just picked a picture which shows a building, and they omitted pictures with pregnant women all over the place and doctors and people from Ukraine who were born in Mariupol and who were still living there or used to live there quite recently posted, it's the hospital I was born in. So it's ridiculous to
So
claim
that was where you were
such
literally
things when you
born?
have. Yeah, I know people who would post on social media, I was born in this hospital. Oh my gosh, I know people who are living in Mariupol and they are pregnant. You can see pregnant women, and Russia would say, no, it's fake. These women are not pregnant. They are not giving birth. But I am
Wow,
horribly sorry that at least one woman died there. But
that's awful.
also there was a woman that appeared on the picture, and she gave a birth. She managed to give a birth, and she and her child are safe and healthy. So, oh my God, God bless all the Ukrainians in Mariupol.
Yeah. And then what's the last one? This thing about the pathogens?
This is something that it's hard even to describe. So the Department of Defense, Russia Federation believes that US together with Ukraine want to spread pathogens with the help of birds, and they are working to use birds as a weapon, as a biological weapon against Russia.
They got to come up with some better disinformation. I mean, if they're going to try to come up with stuff to discredit the US, they got to hire somebody who's a better storyteller to come up with some better stuff, because this stuff is so ridiculous and off that it's
I
like,
guess
what?
the news are full with the fake news rules. How to that the more vicious your lies are, the better the community in Russia can accept it. So I cannot even comment on that.
It's unbelievable. So we're nearing the end of our show, but what about the people that are leaving? So do you have any friends or relatives who have left, and what's their situation now?
I have friends who were forced to leave capital of Ukraine because of many reasons. First of all, some of my friends have small kids, and they are responsible for their safety and security. And I also have friends who have grandparents who need medical support, medical assistance, and accessibility of hospitals. And it's very important for my friends to take care of their parents. So it's not because they want to leave; they were leaving and crying, crossing the borders. And of course, I know a lot of people who left the capital and moved to currently more stable and, so to say, secure regions of Ukraine. And some of their houses are being captured by Russian military forces to establish a small camps there, which is also a violation of human rights, by the way. And
Wait, so
yeah,
they're essentially occupying, you're saying they're essentially occupying their homes?
Yeah, yes. And it's happening in the Kiev region because the capital is a very important target for Russians. And the various satellite cities in Kiev are being horribly attacked, and my colleagues live there, and I read stories from them how they are hiding in their cellars, and how people are also resisting the occupation and forcing troops to leave. Unarmed people are stepping from their house and tell them leave, when the guns are directed against them.
Wow.
I know lawyers who lived in various small towns really close to Kiev, and how they managed to escape from being bombed, but their neighbors did not manage. And these heartbreaking stories, they are not even about the something material, the houses or some material possessions. It's about the unity of people who are standing together with the elderly, with their grandparents, and trying to help everyone stay safe. So leaving your house is truly heartbreaking because you are not sure whether it will still be there. And I know friends from Kharkiv who are volunteering in the Western Ukraine to help people adjust, get shelters, etc., helping with humanitarian aid. And they are not sure whether their house in Kharkiv is still there. And the chances
Wow.
are really high that that apartment building got got shelled also. And it is true, unfortunately, for a lot of cities in Ukraine. Sumy, Izum, Chernihiv. I have friends in Chernihiv. Uh, her mom was a school teacher, and it is a school teacher, but she got really badly injured because a rocket hit the school,
Wow.
and she got a surgery, and everything will be fine. We are all praying and supporting, but when we tried to donate money to her, she told, no, please support the army, we are keeping up,
Wow.
we need to support our soldiers. And she would not even accept that support. And it's very hard to find any correct words how you can really address those people and what you are supposed to tell. And unfortunately, lots of classes aimed at international law and politics and security and international legal order, um, etc., are not teaching us about that, because we think that war is something theoretical, that is something unreal and surreal, and we would read cases like from Second World War and would mm, speak about war only during our classes. But no, it's reality. It's reality that is happening every hour. And it's super important to get educated about these issues, about international law and international organizations that are working to promote human rights and are working against those who are oppressing them.
Yeah, I remember at Fletcher, Diane Mazurana and Elizabeth Seitz said, and in my class on gender, conflict, and culture in complex humanitarian emergencies, the longest course title ever created, they said, what you learn here is going to prepare you for 3 days on the ground. Good luck. It's, we can sit in our own and pontificate about what no-fly zones and what we should do and blah 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 and what Putin's psychology is, but like for the people on the ground who are being shelled and hiding in the basement, all the theory kind of goes out the window. It's just so, and so much of our theory, I feel like too, is so like if we think about international relations theory in general, it's all this like great power competition. It's so lofty and it's not human centric. It's like divorced from the humans that are affected by war. And so I think it is important to, yes, to have knowledge of international law and, how to leverage international law and international treaties, but also to not be so up in the weeds of a lot of the, I don't want to, I love the think tanks of DC, but sometimes some of the think tank material is so up here and it's just so divorced from people and their lives on an everyday basis. And I do think we need to marry the theory and the on the ground experience.
Yes, it is true. People in Ukraine are doing crisis management daily, and they don't know theories. They didn't. Most people didn't go to policy schools, but they know how to do that. And yes, unfortunately, lots of reports of think tanks are just reports, and the fact that people are studying and learning a lot is very important. Education plays a huge role in international community, and I will not stop underlining the importance of open mind and of critical thinking and analysis that has to be done independently, and fact checking and the rules of social media running and knowing your history and history of and world history also, because yes, in US it may feel to some people that it's pretty distant, that we are across the ocean and we are protected and nothing will really happen. But the very important thing is that Western democracies and the West and the majority of UN member states are standing for something. They are all signatories to the UN security, to the Charter of UN, and majority of international human law treaties. But I have the one question: what are you standing for? What are you trying to promote? Are you promoting rule of law? Are you promoting human rights and freedoms? Or are you do you even care about the territorial integrity of states that should not be invaded, independent states that have sovereignty, that have history, that are entitled to protection of international law? And the international law community also has obligations, erga omnes inter partes, because they are parties to a lot of international conventions that ask them to take measures when other states are violating their commitments, security commitments.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just looking at the UN Charter, I mean, literally Article 1 says to maintain international peace and security, and to that end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace, for the suppression of acts of aggression or other breaches of the peace, and to bring about by peaceful means and conformity with principles of justice and international law, adjustment or settlement of international disputes or situations which might lead to a breach of the peace. So if this is not aggression, if this is not a breach of the peace, what the heck is the purpose of the United Nations? I mean, it seems to be like this is what the UN was designed for. Like literally Article 1.1 is to maintain international peace and security and to suppress acts of aggression. I mean, that is literally Article 1.1 of the United Nations. So what are we doing?
Yes, the UN Charter contains a lot of important provisions and prohibition of the acts of aggression and prohibition of invasion, etc., etc. But it's very important that it's not only about the international institutions that are so valued. and lots of people are dream to work for them and with them. But the idea that every voice is very important. The voices of ordinary people and citizens, regardless of your professional affiliation to the field, is important. That if you care about democracy and about respect to human rights and respect that a country which is independent and sovereign deserves its protection, deserves its self-defense, and deserves that other respect its sovereignty, truly respect and commit to their security guarantees that they agreed to, it's very important that it's not about something happening in Europe, in a country in Eastern Europe. It's a big European country with a large size, with more than 40 million of people, and a lot of people who are living currently abroad, who are working abroad, supporting their families, and know every day that I am Ukrainian. These are my roots, my history, my identity, my heart, and I will always stand for that and promote that, as all the citizens of our other countries do. And if one country is not respectful of the sovereignty of another one, how can you make sure that tomorrow another country would not be targeted, or you will tell that your nation is not even deserving to exist because you are not even a nation, that a president of some distant country would tell you? This is important. It's not only about geopolitics, about energy issues, about the issues of the bipolar system that used to be during Cold War War, and all the rest of it. It's about what is your dignity, what are you standing for, what are the values you are promoting,
Right.
and what are the values of your representatives, of your government, and your senators and your congressmen. It's very important because it pertains to the whole idea of what is really being human means.
I think you're so spot on, Alexandra, that like this is about, it's just so much bigger than let's just stop Russian aggression in Ukraine. This is a moment, and this is what I think Zelensky was saying today was, who are you? What are your values? Like, we're over here trying to defend your values in the US, respect for human rights, democracy, the sanctity of a sovereign nation, freedom of the press, all of the things that Americans love and enjoy every day. And you're fighting for the same values that we have here. And if those are under threat in Ukraine, those are under threat in America. It's not too far. And then the other piece of this is, if this continues to go on, we're looking at a whole destruction of the international order. I mean, it is goodbye. All of the theory bullshit is goodbye. Like, we are looking at a whole new paradigm shift of not only the UN Charter, but of the international order, of international relations theory. It's all going to have to be redone because everything is being called into question.
Russia already managed to get away from its horrible crimes with Crimea, with Donetsk and Luhansk regions, with Georgia, and a lot of other crimes happening all over the world. And it must stop. It must not go further. Ukraine will never surrender. I will repeat it. But if international community just tries to close their eyes, close their ears, and feel that no, it's a country, we need to stay, clever and smart. We need to act very reasonably with our policy, which is so important to us. And I can totally understand that each leader and each president of European countries has to take care about its people and its state. It's super important. But the fact that the disrespect to Ukraine is the disrespect to all European Union as well, and to all the countries who are signatories to the UN Charter, and all the countries that are fighting also for the freedom of speech in their countries. And Russia failed already with that, because there is no freedom of speech. All the media is propaganda, and the people are getting brainwashed by TV, by social media. They are not even having access. And what is more important, that Russia itself is depriving people from that access. It's not the international companies that are cutting off them. No, it's the country that is forbidding us building a new wall from the Russia and trying to hide any information from people. So the idea that if you will be silent and will not care about these crimes and the war that Russia is conducting in Ukraine, that then it means that you are silent if someone is trying to beat your friend, to beat your kid, to beat your neighbor or your classmate, because it just doesn't pertain to me. I will stay away from this situation. And a lot of people are even afraid to call it a war or invasion or aggression. They are trying to find the words like tragedy, as
I
the
know, it's
UN
ridiculous.
Secretary General posted in his Twitter recently, that this tragedy must be stopped. Of course, international leaders should be really careful with the terminology, and before we have the court decision judgment, people tend to be very diplomatic with their position. But I mean, it's the United Nations. Is the organization that was created in its soul, as you, Samantha, said, to stop the wars, to don't let them happen anymore. The idea is peace and security for all, the collective peace and security.
Right.
And Security Council failed in its system.
Yeah.
It is not powerful to act because we have the permanent member, the Russian Federation, who is basically in charge of that.
Yeah, I
And
know having
we
Russia on the
all have
Security
to think
Council is
of
like
that.
a joke. I mean, and I think it also it I mean, with Russia being a permanent member of the Security Council and China, we can't really do it. We're kind of handicapped. So I want to stop here just because we're over time, but I mean, I'm so inspired by you. You're incredibly passionate. I think you've given everybody things to think about here and to know that you might feel like this is not on your doorstep, but it is in so many ways. And it's threatening the entire international order, and that people are dying on the ground every day. And like you said, giving birth in the subways, giving birth in the basements, wondering if they're going to be alive tomorrow, that artists and musicians are picking up a gun instead of picking up the trumpet. I mean, and that Ukrainians are showing just unbelievably courage and resistance. My last question for you before we depart is, what would you like to see the international community do?
Please educate yourself, learn about Ukraine, learn about Ukrainian academicians, artists, pick what you like about Ukraine, help Ukrainians, send your support. If you are willing to support Ukrainian armies, support Ukrainian humanitarian organizations and funds. I guess the links would be shared. And please spread the word, keep posted, don't close your eyes, because it pertains to everyone.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. And I'm thinking of you, and I am rooting for Ukraine. And I hope that the international community steps up.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. All the best to you and to your audience.
Thank you, Alexandra. Take care. Good night. Well, that was an impassioned plea from Oleksandra Poliakova to talk about how much is at stake right now in Ukraine and what hell people are living through. So please do everything you can to help. We're going to post some links in the chat, but some resources for you. So there's a Facebook fundraiser that Alexandra is doing to help her hometown bar in Ukraine on facebook.com/Oleksandra with a K.Poliakova.7. Other resources are supportukrainenow.org, war.ukraine.ua. For stories of real people, www.mywar.in.ua. To the truth about the atrocities that Russia's committing, https dattalion.com. The National Bank of Ukraine has opened a special fundraising account to support the armed forces of Ukraine, which I donated to. Comebackalive.in.ua, donate. Toronto Television. I'm also very proud to say that a graduate of the Women's Leadership Challenge, which is the program that I run and sponsors this program, Samantha Politics, to help women step into their power and change the world. One of our very own alumni right now is on the ground reporting for KTLA, Christina Pashushi. And I encourage you to check out her coverage as well at KTLA and learn what you can. And remember, this is just so incredibly important right now. This is the biggest land invasion since World War II. And we have to do everything we can to support Ukrainians that are fleeing. There's also websites for you if you're interested in hosting a Ukrainian family. Again, I'll put those links in the chat. There's so many things that are popping up to help, but they really need, frankly, our money right now. And they need us to call our congresspersons. Even if you're not comfortable advocating for a no-fly zone, how about a humanitarian no-fly zone where they're able to ensure safe corridors for people to get out, and they're able to ensure humanitarian aid to be delivered so that, like she said, 3-year-old children are not dying of dehydration. That should not be happening today. That's all for tonight's episode of Samantha Politics. If you liked this episode, if you learned something, we please encourage you to click the like button on Facebook, or if you're on YouTube, to hit the subscribe button. If you're on Apple or Spotify podcasts, please hit that subscribe button so that you can follow us with regularly updated episodes, which are on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Please also consider supporting us on Patreon, which is our source to have loyal supporters for less than the price of a Starbucks coffee every month. You can support this type of journalism. And that's www.patreon.com/SamanthroPolitics, SAMANTHRO politics, patreon.com/SamanthaPolitics1. And lastly, a big thank you to our sponsors, Manhattan Wealth Management, for making this possible and for doing their part in the world of helping with that ESG portfolio and making sure that funds aren't going to bad places that perpetuate things like this. So check out Manhattan Wealth Management and manhattanwealth.com, and check out Empower Global. We are a diversity and inclusion training firm with a focus on global companies, tech companies, inclusive leadership, and women's leadership. We've been doing a ton of work around Women's History Month. If you'd like to book us for a keynote or for a corporate workshop, please check out our website at empowerglobal.net. And the Women's Leadership Challenge. If you want to step into your power and change the world, but you don't know how to do it, come learn with me. Come learn with other women who are also committed to stepping into their power, being incredible leaders, and changing the world. You can check that out at womensleadershipchallenge.com. We have a virtual cohort, and we have an in-person Washington, D.C. cohort. That's it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Samantha Politics. Have a great night, everyone. Good night. Oh, wait.